we will not compromise the product for the schedule. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the NS Builders Podcast. First and foremost, I wanted to touch base on, first off, I wanted to thank Build-A-Trend. Did an awesome webinar with them this week, the Building Better Summit, and had the opportunity to not only speak to a lot of you guys about cultivating craftsmanship within your company, but also had the opportunity to answer some questions after. But stay tuned next week for May 6th. Chris Morgan has invited me to be part of the monograph, and we're going to be talking at, let me double check this time here, May 6th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to talk about contractors focused in high quality construction. It's a best practice webinar, so I'll be sharing that on Instagram. If you guys want to, you will have to register. It is free, but you do need to register to get that link. So make sure we check that out. Make sure you guys check that out if you're around. And I do believe that they get recorded, so you can always check it out after. But let's go on that topic. Let's talk about high quality construction and what that means. I know I talk about it a lot, but I think it's really important for us. And I had the opportunity to catch up with Chris on the phone, and we're chatting about it. And he, in short, was praising us for the way we approach construction, the way we approach our projects, and saying how we do such a great job, and we always, it's always about the quality, and it's evident that we know what we're doing. And I paused him and I said, I do really appreciate that, but the difficult thing with social media is that regardless of how transparent you are, there's always this level of filter or filtration, I guess we'll say, through what we produce for content. And I do honestly try to be transparent with the struggles. Obviously, this podcast is a great opportunity to kind of recap some of the struggles. Ken posted on his Revealed, I think last week or the week before, about a mistake he made and how we're going to fix it. And the reason I stopped Chris is because I want to make sure that is aware. People are aware of that. Even some of the simplest tasks we've struggled with, and for a number of reasons. And maybe we'll dig into that in a minute. But it's when I started this company, it was just me, and it was a carpentry company. And I always had the mindset of I wanted to do really great work. I wanted to put my best foot forward. But when you're in the position of owner-operator, or at least for me, and not everyone, I think of Tyler, where he's owner-operator, and he is far more methodical than I was at the time. And I think it was because I was so driven on building the business that I let my quality suffer sometimes, in the sense that I knew I needed to move on from the project, even though I wanted to spend more time on it. But it was when I started hiring people that I realized I can let people slow down, or I can, focus on the business and let these people focus on the actual execution. And I think about this walnut staircase that Mike and one of our other carpenters worked on. And I never told them that, I never set the expectation of, hey, I think that I want to spend a week and a half on it. That's what I had in the budget. And instead they just ran with it. And I said, no, just do whatever it takes to make this right. And we spent 5.5 weeks there. And that was cost that, I didn't get to bill for, but, and it was silly. It was just a bad it came down to bad communication. I didn't communicate to the guys how long I thought it would take. If I had told them a week and a half, they may have said, oh, okay, so we can get it done in a week and a half, but we won't be able to get it done to this level. And I could also have the conversation with the client saying, hey, we can get it done in a week and a half, but I'd love to spend more time on it to get it done to a certain level. Is that worth it to you? But, going, fast forward to, we're in our 7th year of business now, and that's still, something that we struggle with, where it's, we are constantly faced with decisions in the field. And those decisions are what make or break the project. And oftentimes it's a schedule thing. And, for example, we had I'll dig into a framing issue that we ran into. We had some framing that just wasn't completely flat on the walls and ceilings, and maybe the lumber had twisted over time because it was installed weeks or months prior to the board showing up, or there was a detail that was accidentally missed, or someone measured to the wrong side installed something to the wrong side of the line. Whatever the case is, there were just mistakes, and the board hangers came in, hung the board. They're not checking for flatness. The guys that are checking for flatness are the guys that are plastering. And, we had these discrepancies in, these surfaces. And it's, the conversation is, it's important. We know what we're going after. We're not going after, get this thing plastered as quickly as possible. We're going after, no, this wall, this wall has a skylight on it and it's going to have a ton of light. And if you guys are following anything we're doing, how we have a ton of projects that have these like sun-ridden walls where a skylight just pours light down. And it's important that that wall is really flat because, the homeowner is gonna walk up that, set of stairs or walk into that room or walk underneath that skylight. And if that wall is not flat, it's gonna be something that they see all the time, the telegraphing seams or the trowel marks. It's really important. And when we try to put our best foot forward in making sure that that wall is flat, that's a great first step, but that's not always going to get us everything that we need. And, that's where it's the conversation of, well, do we just, hey, this wall, there's a dip in this wall. Do you want, we didn't include that. It's a real life conversation of, no, we know what we're setting out to do. We know what our expectations are. Yes, maybe we didn't uphold our end of the bargain where the wall wasn't framed completely flat, or we had a discrepancy in it, or something happened with the material shrinkage, whatever the case is, that's on us. And, for us to, we're asking the plasterer rather than saying, hey, you should fix it because we want the wall flat. It's, hey, we missed the mark. We didn't give you a 10 out of 10 for that surface, but we still want to achieve the very best. So how do we work together? And, that's one example. And I think right now I'm thinking of another example where we're talking about paint and, there's a question as to when, is the plaster dry enough? Are the levels of pH in the plaster low enough where we can paint? Are we setting ourselves up for success by painting, at this time in the schedule, or should we wait to see if it dries out more? Those are real considerations, and it's, from the client wants the job done as quickly as possible, but we have to remember that it's the end result, and it's super difficult to have this conversation around schedule, and it's oftentimes where to be frank, it's probably where we rate the lowest in client satisfaction, is because we run into these situations and we will not compromise the product for the schedule. And if because at the end of the day it's no, we need another week before we paint, because that's going to let the paint job last longer, or that's going to allow for a better product. And that week is going to hurt, and they're going to be frustrated that the project's going to be a week behind schedule. But at the end of the day, when it's all done, we're not running the risk of having a product that fails, where that week is going to be this small blip in their memory, and they're going to only going to be able to focus on the end product, and that end product has to be really great. Where it's, if we compromise that week and we have paint failure later on, then it's a totally different animal. That's something that they see. It's a failure. Or the product isn't as high quality as we set out for it to be, and they're going to see that, and that's more long lasting than a week delay. But let's talk about that, right? If we're going to have that week delay, the best way to approach that, again, is communication. We're talking to the client, explaining the situation, and just being upfront with it. They may be frustrated. It's a real conversation I've had recently, but it's we have to communicate the reason as to why we're doing it. It's about the end product. It's about the result. It's about the level of expectation that they've hired us for. It's difficult, and for me, it's always been something that has been secondary is schedule. I've joked that I love to do a project that we don't have schedule. But on the other side, it's like, I'm aggressive when it comes to schedule. I like to be aggressive, and I try, you know, and I, you know, as I grow in my career, I realize that, being aggressive with the schedule is fine, but communicating an aggressive schedule, only hurts us. Where, my team is far better at being conservative with a schedule, and communicating a conservative schedule to a client. And then, yes, behind the scenes, we can be more aggressive. So ultimately, we finish on time or before we said we would, and we look like a hero, where it's previously to, before I had project managers, I would be aggressive. Like, yeah, we'll get this done in 2 months. And it's, 3 months later. And, I didn't communicate why things were taking longer. And, at the end, and looking back, it was like, well, yeah, we could have done it in 2 months if everything was outlined. We had all the information, and that's really something that, being an owner operator, I struggled with a lot. So that brings me to something that's a very real conversation in our company right now. And I think I alluded to it last week, but there's this restructure, we'll call it, in the sense that, this company started out as a carpentry company 7 years ago, and we've grown into a remodeling company. We've grown into major remodeling. We've done new construction, and now this year we're transitioning into focusing almost entirely on ground up new construction, and as far as remodel, we're looking at full scale remodel, meaning we're doing the entire space. And with that being said, it's something that when I started the company as NS Builders, it was always set out to be a home builder, and yes, I was a carpentry company to begin with. And I always think about how that name didn't really pertain to what I was doing, but it pertained to what I wanted to be doing in the future. So to be able to shift our company into ground up new construction, more custom homes is fantastic, and I'm super excited about it. But as far as talking about, the restructure, I sat down with my team last week. I'm sorry, the beginning of this week. And, and it was a time where it's been a heck of a year, and we have struggled in many categories, with everything that's going on in the world. And, morale has spiked and dipped drastically. We've had some guys leave to go off and do their own thing. We've had to let go of some guys because of level of expectation wasn't being hit. Whether that, and to sidetrack us a moment, anytime that we get in a situation like that, it's difficult for me, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for outlining those expectations, and I am certainly extremely critical of myself, where I think, could I have done a better job outlining expectations? How could I have outlined those expectations? What can I learn from this? Am I making the right decision, or am I making a bad decision based on the fact that I wasn't a good leader? But at the end of the day, anytime I've had to let someone go, my understanding is that this isn't just for the company. It should be this mutually agreed upon thing where it's good for them, and it's good for me, and it's good for the company. And maybe it doesn't seem like that in the beginning, but if I'm not doing a good job leading or setting expectations, and I let someone go based on the fact that they weren't hitting expectations, then I would hope that the understanding is that I'm doing that for them, being that they're not hitting expectations because it's me, and I can't change who I am. And I shouldn't say that. I can. I'm working to, become better at everything I do, especially setting and maintaining expectations. So I try to put myself in their shoes, in the sense that, listen, I'm not getting the leadership I need. And, and ultimately, if I'm being judged on the expectations, and the leadership isn't there, then hey, maybe I do need to work for someone that does have their crap together. And that's just me being really critical on myself, because when we break it down further, you know, some people just don't have the drive or don't have the gung ho attitude, and that's not everyone. I'm not generalizing everyone that we've unfortunately lost throughout the career of NS Builders, but some guys just don't have it, or some, there's not a level of urgency when it comes to their work. And for me, that was part of this meeting this week of just kind of talking about restructuring. As we aim to shift this business into our goal of building ground up really custom homes, I need people to be on board. And when you join a company early on and it's a carpentry company and we're doing primarily finished carpentry, and that scope of work kind of gets less and less, and we start getting into more and more subcontractors, or big more general carpentry, in the sense that we're not always doing finish work. Sometimes we're doing finish work, and sometimes we're doing rough carpentry or subcontractor support. To join a company as a finished carpenter and do finished carpentry and then switch to that, it's important for me to make sure that those guys are on the same page and understand what my goals are with the company. Because, and I say in that meeting, is that if you guys don't agree, or you're not excited about the direction of this company, let's have a conversation about it, and let's work to find you a better opportunity. And and that's, I genuinely mean that. I don't want people working here to and being stressed out about their job or not enjoying their job. And at the end of the day, I want everyone to be massively successful personally, and in hopes that we take those individual successes and attribute them to the success of the company, and as a team, and like really, really working together. If people are winning individually, and we're collectively working together as a team, I feel like then we have this opportunity to win as a team and as a company. And I feel like I'm kind of going in circles here, but what I'm really getting at is that, we need to all be on the same page and all have an understanding of the goals of the company and share the values in which it takes to get there. And to circle this way back, it's, really being unapologetically determined to do our very best at any cost to the job, cost to us as a company, cost to the schedule. And I mean that. It's been something that we've spent a lot of money, time, and effort in doing. And in the rework budget, we call it the rip it out mentality that it's been deemed. All of that is very real, and it's very taxing mentally, physically, financially, not just on me, but even the guys. And I pulled one of my guys aside just after that meeting that we had, and I was talking about, like, I know how hard it is when I come out, here, and I say, okay, I see what you did, but I really think it would be better this way. Why don't we take the opportunity to redo it? Or maybe it's an issue, like, hey, that's an issue, let's redo it. And I know, and that's difficult, because the further down the line it gets, the more expensive it becomes. But it's also, they've put all this work into it, and we're basically tossing it away and redoing it. But I had mentioned a phone call I had got with a potential client that had been following us and seeing our approach to making sure that every time we did something, it was the very best. And if we had to rip something out and redo it, we did it without question, and it was part of who we were. And that it was ultimately the reason that we were hired for the project with them. And to hear that, it kind of refuels the tank of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think it also attributes back to the way we were able to grow so quickly in the last 7 years. Um, just really being focused on high quality construction, and just being high quality at any expense. But I mean it when I say that it doesn't come easy. Um, it doesn't come easy all the time. There's times where we skate through things and it's awesome, but a lot of what we're doing is the first time, or the first time it's ever been done, or the first time that we've done it, or it's something that we're exploring as hey, this would be a cool solution, or a cool detail. Let's work through it. Or hey, that I see how that came out. What do you think we could have done that better? And then we go back to the drawing board and we make this decision that hey, we could just leave it on this job, but we figured out a better way, and it would cost us $5,000, to the company, and it would be massively better than what's on site. Well, let's go for it and do that. So, yeah, I'm excited to dig into this, and I could sit here and talk about it a lot, but I wanted to just address kind of what's on my mind this week, what's going on, especially in the business and as we grow, and the restructure, which sounds so aggressive. It's not really restructuring entirely, but I guess in short, what we're doing is we're rebuilding the management portion of what we do to allow us to focus on managing larger projects and being prepared for larger projects as they come, across our plate. While we do that, we want to then rebuild the carpentry division of the company. But before we before we really ramp up the carpentry side, we need to have the management buzzing, or bussin', as the kids on TikTok say. But the management side, really, I'm going to get so much flack for that, for saying that. But we need to really have the management dialed in, and that's something that I've worked with my core group in this company a lot over the last 12 months, and really talked about and really dug into and really considered, who are the right people that we need on this team, and what is the goal of the company, and do the people that we have and the people that we want and the people that we're hiring, do they fit that mold or not? So, guys, I appreciate you listening. I love getting all the questions and comments. You guys had a lot of interesting things to say about one of the comments I made last week about traveling the world and building homes, and that's very much something that I want to do, and I'm actually excited. I think we're going to talk about it next week with Chris on Monograph. So make sure you guys tune into that. May 6th, 1 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll be posting on our Instagram for a registration link, but you can also go to the Monograph Instagram. He's got all the information on that. We'll talk to you guys next week. See ya.